God creates us in perfection, with beauty and purpose. But all of us have been broken. All of us have places where we have been shattered. Jesus came to put those pieces back together. If we could only see now what we will be then.
Well, good morning and welcome to St. Andrews. Joining us online or in the room, it's so good that you're here. About 7 weeks ago, my wife and I and our kids packed everything that we owned into a cross-country moving truck and showed up in Orange County from Charlotte, North Carolina. And when we were opening boxes, one of the things that we pulled out was something that was really special to my 8-year-old Charlotte and me. It was this castle that we had built out of Legos. And we had spent hours and hours building this castle out of Legos. So when we get the box, and she's real excited to see it, we open it up, and it looks like this. That's actually our coffee table right now in the den, so Jessica is really happy with me because we poured it all out on the table, and I said, it's no problem. We can rebuild this thing. You know, we have the technology. We can rebuild it. And so we go to work, and she, like only an 8-year-old can, she says, hey, Dad, do you know how? I mean, well, so luckily, in a box marked lamps for the living room, I found these. And it's the instructions for how to build the thing, right? So this is helping us as we put it back together. But wouldn't it be great if you could find like building instructions for life when it gets all broken and shattered and torn apart like that? That's what we need. And right now we're in a series where we're looking at what it would be like to participate with God in rebuilding, in restoring, in renewing our lives and the world. It's called The Power of Re. And we're taking a look at each week from this one particular passage in Isaiah at the things that God says are our job description in partnership with Christ. He begins by saying what Jesus' job description is, and it's to rescue and redeem all of broken humanity. And that's Isaiah 61 verses 1 and 2. How he's going to come and trade despair for hope for us, and he's going to set us free from captivity and bondage, and that's what he's already done. And then he says, those who've been redeemed have a new identity and a new purpose. And we'll pick that up today in Isaiah 61, verse 3 and 4. It says, those that have been rescued and redeemed, they'll be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. And they will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. This is God's word. Thanks be to God. Our role is to play a part in rebuilding. When you think of the word ruins, what picture comes to mind for you? Is it like ancient buildings that have fallen down, stones piled on top of each other? It's dusty and dirty and looks like completely destroyed, right? That's what the writer is talking about, that there are places that the Israelites would literally come back and rebuild structures, but he's speaking of way more than that too. He's talking about the ruins in our communities and the ruins even in our own souls. I grew up in South Louisiana, and every year, hurricane season, another one comes through, and it breaks stuff down and makes major havoc on the people. And every year, my parents decide to still live there, which lots of people do, and I'm still trying to figure that out. But they're there. And a couple of years ago, you may remember, there was a hurricane that came through called Hurricane Katrina, and everybody heard about that. Destroyed New Orleans, right? Well, like 1 month later, Hurricane Rita follows it up, and it didn't get as much press, but it went through my hometown, and it left a trail of devastation, and these are some of the pictures from it, just absolute wreckage and ruin that took place there. And what was really interesting is that maybe even more than the devastation done by the wind and the flood waters and the rain that came through was even more insidious. It was what was left behind after all of that took off and returned to normal. Isn't it Do you feel this way? Like sometimes I look at this and I'm just like desensitized to it. We're so used to seeing destruction, it kind of doesn't even move us anymore. It's like we don't see it for what it is. And here's what happened in Lake Charles is that the water had gotten underneath all kinds of foundations of buildings and houses. And what we would find months, even years later, is that there were problems that would emerge because of damage you couldn't see. That's usually what happens. Ruins always have a reason. And so like in my parents' house, we saw this crack starting to develop on the door casing, right? And it went up just 8 inches, and then the next time I was home, it was like 1.5 feet, and I was like, do you see the crack? And, you get used to it being there. And it was like, it's probably it's cosmetic. Put some spackle on it, repaint it, we'll be fine. Plant some new bushes out front. Nobody will even pay attention to that stuff, right? We'll just distract them. And yet over time, we found out that the foundation had been cracked, that there was damage that was being done that had to be dealt with. And here's the problem with ruins. They always have a reason, but sometimes we don't see them. Sometimes we see them, but we choose not to deal with it. Throw some spackle up there. Or we hire the wrong person, an unqualified person to try to fix the problem. There were lots of guys who 2 days before the hurricane were just regular old general handymen that suddenly were out fixing foundations, and that's not the way to go when you're going to live underneath that roof. You need someone uniquely qualified. So in the next few minutes, I want to talk to you about how Jesus is the uniquely qualified one to rebuild our lives and how we'll partner with him to rebuild our community. Because here's the thing. It's not just ruins in city, it's the ruin inside us. And I'm going to embark now for about a 10-minute, super encouraging, motivational message that you're going to be so glad you came to church. But it's not going to sound like it at first. It might hurt just a little bit, but bear with me. It's so bad in our soul that apart from Christ, it looks like ruins, rubble. In fact, the Apostle Paul, who wrote about this to the church in Rome, he described our situation before we come to Jesus or outside of Jesus with some really particularly fun words. Here's what he said in Romans 3. He says, "There's no one righteous, not even one. There's no one who understands. There's no one who seeks God. All have turned away, and they have together become worthless." There's no one who does good, not even one. I mean, okay, come on, Paul. You're making a point, hyperbole, right? I get it. He goes on. He says, "They've become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips." They are gossips. We don't usually count that one. "Slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil." It is the Silicon Valley of sin right here. We are so good at it, we can make up new ways to be bad. It says they disobey their parents. Yikes. They have no understanding, no fidelity, no love, no mercy. And although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these very things, but they approve of those who practice them. Way to go. Never seen anybody be that bad before, right? This is the state of our soul apart from Christ. And you're probably thinking, well, maybe that's like them, but not everybody is that bad. I do good stuff occasionally, right? We want to believe that this isn't actually the way it is because just like the cracks in our house, we want to just pretend like we don't see them. Or it's cosmetic. It's not foundational. Slap some paint on, it'll be fine. I was thinking about how Jesus knew that would be our reaction. And so multiple ways he tries to impress upon us just how bad the bad news is. He said, do you remember this? When he was in the Sermon on the Mount, he was like, oh yeah, you know it's wrong to commit adultery with somebody, but if you've lusted after somebody, you've basically already done that, guilty. Okay, maybe not that. Murder, clearly out, would we agree? But if you get angry with somebody, you've already started down the path. We are ruined inside, according to Jesus. And then he tells that story. The story, it might be called the parable of the two sons, or some of us know it as the prodigal son. Wednesday nights, during Wednesday night together, we're doing something called Discovering St. Andrews, which is a way for you to join or kind of find your place to become members here, and would love to have you join us. But this past week, I was teaching this parable as like the epitome of Christian faith. And you know the story. If you don't, it's really easy to catch up. There's two boys. One of them is just a total jerk, hellion. He goes to dad. He's like, I wish you were dead. Give me my money, inheritance now, and I'm going to go do my thing. And dad, surprisingly, says, okay. And so the boy goes out, and he's all the things that Paul was just talking about. He's the rebellious, sexually deviant, living lavishly guy. He does that, he hits rock bottom, and he comes home, and he says, Dad, I don't even deserve to be part of the family anymore. Just give me a job working in the house, right? He is just busted. He realizes the ruin of his life. And the dad says, come on in. In fact, come on in as part of the family again. I'm gonna make you mine. You know the story, right? And you remember the other brother. He's the one that's thinking like you and I were just thinking, I'm not that bad. In fact, he's so frustrated with dad that dad would let that recalcitrant son back into the house, one who just made a mockery of the family. He doesn't recoil from him. He actually moves towards him and he says, no, you come back in. I'm loving you this way. And the older son is so angry, he won't even go into the party because he believes that he is righteous, that he's not that bad. He doesn't see the soul that's in ruins. It's just cosmetic. It's not foundational. This got real clear to me the other night. I love it when God does this kind of thing. Friday night, we order a pizza, and I order online so that it'll be, ready, like make the most of my time. So I order online, and I go show up. It says it's going to be ready at 6:08. I show up at 6:06 because my parents taught me that on time is late. Some of you learned that lesson too. So I'm there early, and I go in, and I'm like, I'm Jason, here to pick up my pizza, and the 15-year-old behind the counter says, sorry, sir, it's not ready yet. It's going to be about 10 more minutes. I'm like, okay. So I take a seat. And then two things happen. A guy walking out of the pizza place opens the door, and I can see through the door there's a man coming across the parking lot. He's probably going as fast as he can, but it's not very fast. And it's a pretty long walk, and he's making his way over, and this guy just holds the door. And you ever have those situations where you hold the door for like an awkwardly long time? You make the decision, and then you're like, I could have just let this thing close. Well, we're in that situation. And the guy's making his way over, and he finally says, I didn't deserve that. Wow, thanks. And I thought, what a small thing, but what a younger brother attitude. I don't deserve that. I don't deserve anything. Second thing that happens. 60 seconds later, a guy walks in. He goes up to the counter, same 15-year-old girl, and he says, I'm here to pick up my pizza. And she says, oh, sir, sorry, we're a little behind. It's going to be about 10 more minutes. And not kidding, he takes his phone out and he says, it says 6:15. I deserve my pizza. I hope you're not here today. And he's just angry. And she's 15. She's not even the one cooking the pizza, right? She's just the bearer of bad news, and she gets all flustered, and she's like, guy, is there any pizza? Just give him a pizza. And he's like blowing up, and I'm sitting there, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking like, what a jerk, right? You know what I'm thinking? Dang right, that's why I ordered mine online too. Why is this taking so long? I'm thinking the same thing that he is. I'm just not saying it. Like, there is ruin of my soul, and I'm your pastor. How are we getting out of this? How do we rebuild that? See, it's not just cosmetic. It is foundational. Apart from Christ, we don't have a chance. But thanks be to God. He is a better rebuilder even than a builder. So he sends Jesus to us. And Jesus, and I can give you all kinds of ways to describe it. Peter in Acts says that there's no other name under heaven by which someone can be saved. Paul writes in the same way that God made Christ a sacrifice of atonement. Like, he went to a cross to pay the penalty for my being a jerk inside that no one found out until I told whatever 1,000 people that are here this weekend about it, right? And that guy who was a jerk at the counter and every other thing that's been done. And Jesus says, I'll take the penalty for all that. But first, I'm going to live a life of an unruined soul. Perfect. And then I'll trade you. How about your resume for mine? That's amazing good news. It's the reason we have hope. And he makes the trade if you want that, and then we start the rebuilding process. But it's always got to start at the foundation level. Then we have to deal with what's going on around us. Because sometimes for us, and maybe this is your story, the stuff that's falling apart in your life, the ruin or rubble of your life, is maybe it doesn't feel like it's something that you did. Maybe it's not. It's just that life happened to you because we live in a sin-broken world. And I want to show you this story of a guy from our church who's lived through this as a way of maybe inspiring you. And what you wanted to do is I want you to pay attention and see the secret. See if you can hear what he says is the secret to rebuilding a life that's in ruin. Check this out.
Business back in 2000s was doing very, very well, and married the love of my life, Renee, and we're having kids. And first my little daughter Kenzie in 2007, and then Caden 2008. And I remember being over at Hoag Hospital and just thinking, how could things get any better? Just the love that was in that room was amazing. 10 days later, we found out that Renee had stage 4 colon cancer. Struggled with what is going on, why would God do this? And but she fought it, and 18 months later she passed. But during that time, if you remember, the economy had taken a turn, and our company had taken a turn with it. And our company shut down 6 months after she passed. And so here I am, a single dad. I was a workaholic, and I loved working. I loved what I was doing. I loved being in business and creating. And I knew God wanted something for me, and I couldn't understand. He didn't want the pain I was going through, but he gave me these 2 gifts in Kenzie and Caden. And even though I had other job opportunities and people calling me and expressing their concern and opportunities as far as working for a manufacturer and what have you, Renee wanted these kids to have a full life. And what better way than through myself and through God helping direct. And so I had to kind of release and go. And over time, things worked out. And it did take time, and it was a lot of pain and a lot of thinking, God, what are you doing in my life? What do you want me to do? How am I going to take care of these 2 little guys and work from the house and do what I need to do in my world? And jumping ahead today, they're 14 and 15. I got myself in a lot of debt during that time, but I'm debt-free today. And they're just amazing children. And I'm just so blessed to have not only had the children that Renee and God gave me, but also to have that opportunity to maybe fall down on my knees and understand, look up and say, God, what is it you want from me? And here I am today, and don't know what the next chapter will be, but as of today, God has blessed me greatly, and I'm so thankful.
Yeah. How do you go about rebuilding that? You lost your wife, mother to young children, business, finances are in ruin. That's ruins, right? Did you hear the secret that he said at the end? He said, I had the opportunity to fall down on my knees and say, God, what do you want from me today? That's how this process, whatever shape your life looks like it's in right now, that's the way you begin, is one day, one moment at a time, surrendering whatever it is to God and say, this is yours. You do the work. You're the rebuilder. I'm not qualified. I need an expert, Jesus. You have to do it. And so you submit your family, and you submit your dollars, and you submit your career, and the relationships that are messed up, and the spouse, and all of your life. You submit to him, and you go, okay, God, let's do this together. What do I do today? And Peter, who is one of my favorite examples of what not to do in following Jesus usually, but then he comes back around and he makes a great reformation. He writes about this, and he says this in his letter, 2 Peter 1. He says, the divine power that God has given us, that the Spirit of Christ in us, has given us everything we need for a godly life. You already have everything you need to live the life God wants you to live if you have Christ. The same Spirit that empowered Jesus to be the Redeemer, Rescuer, and that rose him from the dead, that made that cold, dead body warm up and his heart start beating again in the tomb, that same Spirit lives in you and me. So why is it that we aren't doing the same things that Jesus did? That's a real question. The reason is because we have to start with one step at a time and do what Peter says. Here's what he says next. For this reason, make every effort to add to your faith, the part that you didn't do anything to earn, just the gift, your faith, goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control. Self-control, like don't scream at the 15-year-old pizza girl, right? And to self-control, perseverance, and to perseverance, godliness, and to godliness, mutual affection, and to mutual affection, love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, if you're growing this way, and I'm growing this way, if they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive. They'll keep us from not being able to go about the rebuilding God wants to do in and around us. Because whoever doesn't have them is nearsighted and blind, forgetting that they've been cleansed from their past sins. It's just cosmetic. Throw some paint on it. So, our communities are in ruins too. And why not? It's just a combination of a bunch of individuals whose hearts are messed up, and then you put it together and we end up with broken systems, family systems, and patterns of abuse, and all the stuff that comes with that, and broken organizational systems, and political systems, and educational systems, and communities that don't trust and divide. Like, of course this is what happens, because sin infected everything, and we go about one by one getting it cleaned out of us, and then it reinfects the next, and it just keeps coming and coming. And so what Jesus says is, I want you to partner with me in bringing the kingdom of God to bear right in the place where you are. And I want to give you right now an opportunity to begin to do that with us together as a church. We're going to engage in something called Love Newport in the next couple of weeks. October 15th, on a Saturday, we, along with other churches in the area and nonprofits, we are going to put love in action. And my hope is that we come into contact with this love we've experienced, the redemption we've been given, and then we just let it flow and we unleash love on this community like it's never seen. And it's really easy. You go to this website, lovenewportbeach.org. There are projects you can sign up to be a part of. Everything from visiting people in nursing homes to cleanup on the beach or on yards to supporting the fire department and police department. You could even better say, I've got this passion and I am going to organize a group of people and we're going to go serve the Crisis Pregnancy Center. Or we're going to serve some people who are in need that I know about. Like, let's just let Jesus begin rebuilding through us. Can we do that together? I think yes? Yes, we can. That was rhetorical also. We can do it. Because all that it really is that rebuilt people rebuild things. You can't expect people whose hearts and souls look like what I just read to you from Romans to go about doing the work of rebuilding. This is us. This is our job. And we get to do it with Jesus alongside. And here's the only thing I'm going to ask you, is as you allow your life to be rebuilt by him, and as you join in places where he's going to put you and rebuild in the community, be patient with yourself and with the people that you're trying to love, because you're going to need it. Because it takes time. Nobody's ever rebuilt a house from scratch and had it happen faster than the budgeted time, right? It always takes 50% longer and costs 30% more, or maybe it's the other way. Same is true for us. To remind us of that, I want to end with this quote before I pray for you, and it's from C.S. Lewis. And it's one of my favorites. He talks about what life is like when we invite the great architect and rebuilder Jesus in. So he says, imagine yourself a living house. Like your life is a house. And God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps you can understand what he's doing. He's getting the drains right and stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. You knew that those jobs needed to be done, so you're not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably. I love how British C.S. Lewis is. Presently, it hurts abominably. And it doesn't seem to make any sense. Anybody give witness to that? What on earth is he up to? The explanation is that he's building quite a different house from the one that you thought of. He's throwing out a new wing here, putting up an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage. But he's building a palace because he intends to come and live in it himself. This is what we're undergoing together. And this is the invitation that you're invited into today.